Emily was only 18, standing at the threshold of adulthood, yet her world felt impossibly small. Born into a conservative family in a quiet rural town, her days were a routine of obedience and quiet dreams. The walls of her childhood home, though familiar and safe, felt increasingly like a cage. Her father, a stern man with a firm sense of duty, and her mother, anxious and practical, saw life in clear, rigid lines. Marry well, serve loyally, and uphold the family's modest reputation. Love, passion, or personal ambition were luxuries Emily was told she could not afford. At least, not until her family's plan for her life unfolded. Emily herself was bright and observant, with a gentle heart that loved nature, animals, and the quiet rhythm of small-town life. She found joy in small things: the first bloom of spring in her mother's garden, the soft whisper of wind through the wheat fields, and the stories she would imagine while helping her mother with household chores. She longed for freedom, not rebellion, but the simple chance to make her own choices, to see the world beyond the small patch of land she had always known. But the weight of her family's expectations hung heavily on her. The news of John, a wealthy widowed rancher living on a sprawling property several miles out of town, stirred whispers in the community. John was a man of quiet reputation, hard-working, solitary, and responsible for 3 children, still grieving the loss of their mother. While the townspeople speculated about his needs and the prospects of a new marriage, Emily's family saw opportunity. They believed a union with John would secure her future materially and socially, and simultaneously benefit the struggling ranch by providing a mother for his children. To Emily, the prospect was bewildering. She had never met him, never even spoken to anyone like him, yet the expectation was clear. She was to marry. At home, the conversations were veiled but insistent. Her father spoke in a tone that left no room for objection, emphasizing security, stability, and duty. Her mother, torn between concern and obedience to her husband, tried to soften the edges with gentle warnings and the occasional tearful plea for Emily to accept what was best. Her siblings, younger and naive themselves, looked at her with admiration and envy, unable to fully grasp the enormity of what was being asked. Emily's heart ached as she considered the life she would be leaving behind. The garden she tended, the fields she roamed, the friends whose laughter had been her comfort. But the family's pressure, combined with the social norms of her world, allowed little room for resistance. Even as she reluctantly agreed, Emily's mind was a whirlwind of questions and fears. What would the children be like? Would she be able to manage a household so different from her own? Could she bear the responsibility of becoming a mother figure to children she did not know? And what of John? Would he be kind or distant? The uncertainty was overwhelming, yet Emily carried within her a quiet, untested courage. She did not fully understand it, but something inside whispered that she could survive, adapt, and perhaps even thrive in the new life that awaited her. The night before her departure, Emily stood by her window, gazing at the horizon, feeling the weight of her youth and the enormity of the unknown. Her heart beat with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a fragile hope. Little did she know that this step, obedient yet uncertain, would set in motion a journey of love, struggle, and transformation. The girl who left home that night would not remain the same. The world beyond her family's walls promised change, challenge, and a chance to discover a strength she had never known existed. The day John arrived at Emily's home was clouded with tension, anticipation, and a subtle, unspoken anxiety. Emily had heard stories about him in the small town, tales of a widowed rancher who was both wealthy and solitary, a man who had endured the heartbreak of losing his wife and was now left to care for 3 children on his sprawling, rugged property. To Emily's family, John was a solution, a stable, well-off man who could provide security and a respectable position in society. To Emily, he was a stranger whose presence evoked a mix of curiosity and trepidation. John's appearance at the door was unassuming. Tall and broad-shouldered, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone used to laborious work. His eyes, a deep shade of blue, held traces of sorrow and a careful wariness. a man who had been hurt but learned to shield his heart. He greeted Emily politely, though with a firmness that suggested life had taught him self-reliance and caution. Emily's heart raced, not out of love or longing, but from the uncertainty of what was expected of her. The conversation that followed was both formal and heavy with unspoken implications. John expressed his practical needs, a partner to help manage the children, maintain the household, and support the ranch's daily operations. There was no romantic flourish, no promises of fairy tale love, only the stark reality of responsibility. Emily's family, eager to facilitate the union, pressed her subtly, presenting the proposal as both an honor and a duty. Her father's voice, steady and insistent, reminded her of her obligations, while her mother's softer tones tried to persuade through emotion rather than force. Emily, only 18 and still forming her understanding of adult life, felt a whirlpool of conflicting emotions. She knew that refusing could bring shame to her family, provoke resentment from the community, and potentially close doors she might never reopen. Yet the thought of marrying a man she barely knew, stepping into a home with 3 children she had never met, and abandoning the life she had always known, filled her with fear. Despite this, a small voice within her whispered that perhaps this was the first step toward the independence she secretly craved, a chance to define herself outside the confines of her parents' rules. John, for his part, approached the proposal with practicality rather than sentimentality. He was aware of his children's needs, the delicate balance between discipline and nurturing, and the challenges of integrating a new figure into a household still haunted by loss. He respected Emily's youth, knowing the weight of this decision would rest heavily on her shoulders. He spoke plainly about his expectations, the hard work of ranch life, and the necessity of patience, both with the children and with him. There was no attempt to rush her, but the underlying urgency was clear. The ranch needed stability, and the children needed care. Emily's agreement came quietly, a mix of obedience, fear, and tentative hope. She did not fully understand the life she was stepping into, nor the emotional landscape she would have to navigate. But she felt a strange combination of relief and apprehension. Relief at the clarity of the path ahead, apprehension at the unknown challenges it promised. In that moment, she crossed the threshold from the familiar world of her childhood into a life that would test her courage, reshape her identity, and ultimately reveal strengths she had never realized she possessed. As John prepared to leave, he offered a courteous, almost paternal nod, leaving Emily with the weight of the impending journey. She watched him disappear down the dusty road, her heart a tangle of nerves and curiosity. That day marked the beginning of a transformative chapter, a step into uncertainty, responsibility, and, unknowingly, the start of a story that would change her life forever. The morning Emily left her family home, the air was thick with both expectation and uncertainty. She had packed her few belongings carefully, each item a small reminder of the life she was leaving behind. Her mother pressed a worn handkerchief into her hands, whispering words of caution and encouragement. Her father, stoic and unreadable, simply nodded, his eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and concern. Emily's heart was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, anticipation, and a tiny spark of excitement that she tried to suppress. She knew that life beyond the familiar boundaries of her home was vast and unknown, and she was stepping into it with nothing but courage and the faintest hope that she could belong. The journey to John's ranch was long, winding through dusty roads and rolling hills that stretched beyond the horizon. Emily gazed out of the carriage window, taking in the vastness of the landscape. It was breathtaking, but it also emphasized her isolation. She had never been so far from her home, never faced a world where the comfort of family, friends, and routine did not surround her. Each passing mile made the reality of her new life more immediate and undeniable. When she arrived, the ranch loomed large and imposing, a reflection of both John's success and the weight of responsibility that came with managing it. The house was sturdy and functional, surrounded by barns, stables, and acres of farmland. But the grandeur of the ranch did little to ease Emily's nerves. She was stepping into a home already defined by absence, the absence of John's late wife, and the inevitable gap she would need to fill. She wondered if she could ever live up to the expectations, not only of the ranch and its upkeep, but of the children whose hearts were still mourning. The children themselves were wary and unwelcoming. The eldest, 10-year-old William, watched her with quiet suspicion, protective of the memory of his mother. 8-year-old Clara, sensitive and cautious, kept her distance, while 5-year-old Ben, curious yet unsure, oscillated between intrigue and hesitation. Emily's first interactions with them were awkward. Her attempts at conversation felt stilted, and her offers to help around the house were met with tentative resistance. The children had formed a routine with their father, and her sudden presence disrupted a delicate balance. She realized immediately that her role was not just as a wife, but as someone who would need to earn trust, respect, and eventually affection. John, though polite and courteous, maintained a reserved distance. He observed Emily closely, aware of both her youth and her inexperience with ranch life. He was cautious, not unkind, but measured in his words and expectations. He guided her through basic chores, explained the daily schedule, and highlighted the responsibilities she would need to shoulder. Emily listened attentively, absorbing every detail while grappling with her own insecurities. She understood that failing to meet these expectations could have consequences far beyond personal disappointment. It could disrupt the fragile equilibrium of the family. Loneliness enveloped her in the evenings. The ranch, though alive with animals and the rhythm of work, felt vast and empty when silence fell. Emily often found herself sitting quietly by the window, reflecting on the life she had left behind, missing the warmth of her family and the familiarity of her old routines. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty, a quiet determination began to grow. She resolved to learn, to adapt, and to find a place for herself within this new family. By the end of the first week, Emily had begun to understand the contours of ranch life, the exhausting work, the unpredictability of the land, and the subtle dynamics of the household. Though the children remained guarded, she had glimpses of potential connection, a shy smile from Ben, a nod of acknowledgement from William, and Clara's tentative curiosity. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult, filled with trials and adjustments, but she also sensed that with patience, empathy, and resilience, she could begin to carve out a role not just as John's wife, but as a trusted, beloved member of this fractured family. Settling into life on the ranch was far more challenging than Emily had imagined. The early optimism she had carried from her family home slowly gave way to the harsh realities of managing a large household and assisting in the daily operations of a working ranch. Every morning began before sunrise, with chores that seemed endless, feeding the animals, checking the fences, collecting eggs, and helping with cooking and cleaning. Tasks she had only observed from a distance in her childhood now fell squarely on her shoulders. Her body ached from unfamiliar labor, and her hands bore blisters from the hard work. Yet, more than the physical exhaustion, it was the emotional strain that weighed heaviest on her. The children, still grieving the loss of their mother, were far from welcoming. William, the eldest, was intelligent and perceptive, yet deeply skeptical of Emily's presence. He viewed her not as a motherly figure, but as an intruder who might never understand his family or the memory of his mother. Clara, sensitive and cautious, seemed constantly on edge, as though afraid that any acceptance of Emily would betray her late mother. Ben, the youngest, oscillated between curiosity and fear, unsure of how to navigate this new dynamic. Each small misstep on Emily's part, an awkward word, a misunderstood instruction, or even a glance, was met with suspicion or resistance, reinforcing her sense of inadequacy. John, too, was not an easy man to read. He was disciplined, reserved, and unaccustomed to delegating responsibilities, let alone sharing emotional burdens. When Emily tried to suggest changes or offer assistance beyond what he requested, he often responded with curt instructions or subtle criticism. He did not intend to be harsh, but his words carried weight, magnified by Emily's self-doubt. She began to feel as though every action she took was measured against an impossible standard, and every failure confirmed her fears that she was out of place, inexperienced, and unprepared. Misunderstandings became frequent. A spilled bucket of feed, a burned meal, or a mismanaged chore could trigger tension between Emily and John, and she often felt invisible when her efforts went unnoticed. The children, sensing her insecurity, occasionally tested her patience, pulling pranks or speaking sharply. Each conflict left Emily questioning her ability to succeed in this new role. Nights were the hardest. After the chores were done and the ranch settled into silence, she would sit alone, exhausted and discouraged, doubting whether she had the strength to endure this life. Yet amid the struggles, small lessons emerged. Emily began to recognize that patience and observation were as crucial as hard work. By paying attention to the children's routines, preferences, and fears, she slowly learned how to navigate their moods. She realized that John's reserved nature stemmed not from indifference, but from years of hardship and a desire to shield his heart from further pain. Emily began to approach her work with quiet determination, learning the rhythm of the ranch, the needs of the animals, and the subtle cues of the household dynamics. One pivotal moment occurred when she attempted to prepare a special dinner for the children. Her efforts were clumsy, and the result far from perfect. Yet she discovered that genuine effort and care mattered more than flawless execution. The children responded not to the meal itself, but to the thought and attention behind it. Emily's confidence, though still fragile, began to grow. She started to understand that building trust and earning respect required patience, empathy, and consistent presence rather than immediate perfection. By the end of the first month, Emily's struggles remained, but so did her resolve. The challenges of the ranch and the emotional complexities of the family tested her in ways she could not have anticipated, yet they also provided opportunities for growth. She was beginning to learn that love and trust were not given. They were earned through perseverance, kindness, and courage. Emily's journey was only beginning, but even in hardship, she was discovering the quiet resilience that would eventually allow her to become not only a wife and stepmother, but an essential part of this fragile, grieving family. After weeks of tension, adjustment, and quiet observation, Emily began to notice subtle changes in the household, signs that trust and affection were slowly taking root. It started with the youngest, 5-year-old Ben, whose wide, curious eyes often followed her as she moved about the ranch. Emily realized that the key to connecting with him was patience and gentle attention rather than forceful attempts to win his approval. She began small, reading bedtime stories, asking about his day, and listening intently to his thoughts and fears. Ben responded with shy smiles and tentative questions, gradually allowing Emily into his world of imagination and play. These moments, though brief and seemingly minor, were monumental for Emily. They gave her a glimmer of hope that she could indeed make a place for herself in the children's hearts. The middle child, Clara, proved more challenging. Her grief was still raw, and she approached Emily with caution, testing the boundaries of this new figure in her life. Emily learned to approach Clara gently, offering help only when needed, listening without judgment, and respecting her need for space. Slowly, Clara began to confide in Emily, sharing small secrets and stories she had never told anyone else. This tentative bond was fragile, but Emily cherished it, recognizing that building trust with a child still mourning loss required both patience and consistency. William, the eldest, remained the most guarded. Intelligent and perceptive, he observed Emily carefully, measuring her every action against the memory of his late mother. Emily understood that she could never replace the woman who had shaped his early years, but she could show him that she was not an intruder or a threat. She started to engage him in practical matters, helping with chores, managing livestock, and planning for tasks around the ranch. By demonstrating competence, responsibility, and respect for his intelligence, Emily gradually earned his acknowledgement. A nod here, a quiet word of approval there. These were small victories, but they signaled the beginning of mutual respect. John, meanwhile, watched Emily's growing interactions with the children with a mix of admiration and quiet surprise. Her patience, empathy, and determination stood in stark contrast to the fear and uncertainty he had anticipated. He noticed how she handled small crises with composure, how she encouraged the children without forcing her presence upon them, and how she adapted to the rigors of ranch life with resilience he had not expected. Slowly, he began to see Emily not merely as an inexperienced young bride, but as a capable, compassionate partner. The walls he had built around his heart, shaped by grief and solitude, began to soften in her presence. Emily herself began to feel a quiet sense of accomplishment and belonging. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, she experienced moments of genuine joy, shared laughter with the children, a thankful smile from John, and the satisfaction of seeing her efforts yield small but meaningful results. These moments reinforced her determination to persevere, teaching her that love and acceptance were built gradually, through consistent care and authentic engagement. One particular afternoon, Emily organized a small picnic on the ranch grounds, inviting the children to help with simple preparations. Ben enthusiastically carried snacks, Clara carefully set up a blanket, and William, still reserved, assisted with fetching water and ensuring everything was orderly. John observed from a distance, quietly acknowledging the significance of this gesture. Emily was not only creating memories for the children, but also demonstrating her understanding of family dynamics and her growing role within it. By the end of this part of her journey, Emily had begun to see the subtle but profound transformation occurring within the household. What had once been suspicion and distance was slowly giving way to tentative trust and affection. The bonds she was forming were fragile, yes, but real, and they held the promise of deeper connections in the days to come. Through patience, empathy, and consistent effort, Emily was beginning to carve her place in this fractured family, laying the foundation for the love and partnership that would ultimately define her life on the ranch. Life on the ranch, though slowly finding rhythm, was never without its challenges. One afternoon, a sudden and unexpected crisis struck, shaking the fragile equilibrium Emily and John had been working so hard to establish. A severe storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering quickly over the expansive fields, whipping the tall grasses and rattling the barn doors. What began as a routine day of chores quickly became a test of courage, resourcefulness, and teamwork. Emily, already weary from weeks of adjustment, felt her heart pound as the wind howled and rain began to lash against the windows. The children, frightened and unsure, clung to one another and to Emily, looking to her for reassurance. The storm brought with it multiple emergencies. One of the fences enclosing the livestock had broken, leaving the animals at risk of wandering into dangerous terrain. In addition, the barn roof had started to leak, threatening the stored supplies and hay critical to sustaining the ranch. John's immediate instinct was to act swiftly, but he could not manage all tasks alone. The children, naturally, could not be fully relied upon to assist with the physical labor, leaving Emily as the only adult available to help him stabilize the situation. The gravity of the moment was clear. If they did not act quickly, the animals, property, and safety of the children would be at risk. Emily, despite her inexperience, did not falter. Adrenaline surged through her as she assessed the situation. She had spent weeks learning the daily operations of the ranch, observing John's methods, and understanding the rhythm of the land. Now she had to put that knowledge into immediate practice. Without hesitation, she fetched tools, secured gates, and helped move animals to safer areas. John, initially wary of her capabilities, found himself relying on her decisiveness and composure. For the first time, Emily was not merely an observer or a helper. She was an active partner in safeguarding the ranch and family. The children, witnessing Emily's calm and purposeful actions, began to feel a sense of security. Ben, still young and frightened, clung to her side, but followed her instructions in small tasks, like carrying towels and helping to calm frightened animals. Clara and William, though anxious, understood the necessity of contributing, and with Emily's gentle guidance, they assisted in minor yet meaningful ways. The dynamic of the household shifted subtly but powerfully. Emily was not just a presence in their lives. She was a source of stability, courage, and leadership. Throughout the crisis, John observed Emily with growing admiration. He had always known her to be diligent, patient, and kind, but seeing her handle such pressure illuminated a depth of strength and resilience he had not fully appreciated. He realized that she was capable not only of managing the household, but also of meeting the unpredictable demands of ranch life head-on. In that moment, the barriers between them, built from distance, grief, and uncertainty, began to crumble. Mutual respect and trust were forming, grounded not in words but in shared action during a trial that tested both their limits. By the time the storm passed, the ranch was largely secure. Minor damages remained, but no lives were lost, and the children were safe. Emily, soaked and exhausted, felt an unfamiliar but comforting sense of pride. She had risen to the challenge, proven her capability, and in doing so, earned the trust of John and the children in a way that weeks of effort alone could not have achieved. The storm had forced them to rely on one another, bridging gaps of doubt and uncertainty and laying the groundwork for deeper connections. In the aftermath, as the family huddled together in the warmth of the kitchen, drying off and sharing simple food, a quiet shift had occurred. Emily was no longer just the inexperienced young bride trying to adapt. She was a partner, a protector, and someone the family could depend on in times of trial. This first crisis had not only tested their abilities, but had also begun to transform the household into a true family, bound by shared experience, courage, and the emerging strength of trust and affection. The storm had passed, leaving the ranch drenched but intact, and in its wake the household carried a subtle shift in atmosphere. The shared challenge had broken down barriers that weeks of cautious coexistence had struggled to erode. Emily's courage and resourcefulness during the crisis had not only impressed John, but had also quietly transformed his perception of her. Where he had once seen a timid, inexperienced young bride, he now recognized a woman of strength, intelligence, and resilience. Likewise, Emily, witnessing John's steadfastness and protective nature under pressure, began to feel a deeper appreciation for him, not merely as a provider or authority figure, but as a man of depth and quiet sensitivity. In the days that followed, the household settled into a more balanced rhythm. Emily continued her chores with confidence, guiding the children with patience and warmth. William, Clara, and Ben were noticeably more receptive, trusting her presence and increasingly seeking her counsel. These small victories strengthened Emily's sense of belonging, but they also stirred an awareness of her own emotional landscape. She realized that her concern for John and the children had evolved into a genuine affection, one that encompassed care, admiration, and the subtle beginnings of love. She had grown from a tentative newcomer into someone who felt she could shape her place in this family. And perhaps, in John's heart as well, John, meanwhile, found himself reflecting on Emily in quiet moments, often after the day's labor had ended and the children were asleep. He had been cautious in his feelings, protective of his own heart after the loss of his wife. But Emily's actions, her patience, her empathy, her unwavering presence in the face of difficulty, stirred emotions he had long suppressed. He noticed the little things, the way she comforted Ben without condescension, how she encouraged Clara to express her thoughts, the respect she showed William for his intellect and opinions. Each observation chipped away at his emotional defenses, and he found himself yearning for her companionship beyond the practical and the necessary. The first intimate moment of acknowledgement came unexpectedly, one quiet evening after the children had gone to bed. The room was lit by the soft glow of lanterns, the air heavy with the scent of hay and the faint smokiness of the fireplace. John and Emily found themselves alone, the silence between them neither awkward nor strained, but charged with unspoken emotion. In a rare display of vulnerability, John allowed himself to admit his growing feelings. He spoke carefully, acknowledging not only his admiration for her capabilities, but also the warmth and light she had brought into the lives of the children and himself. Emily, heart racing, felt the truth of his words resonate deeply with her own feelings. For Emily, this confession was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had feared that her emotions might be unreciprocated, that her youth and inexperience could be a barrier to love with a man already shaped by loss and responsibility. Yet John's words shattered those fears, validating the affection she had felt for him for weeks. Their mutual acknowledgement was tender and cautious, reflective of the careful foundation of trust and respect they had built together. It was not a sudden declaration of passion, but a heartfelt recognition that they had both grown to care deeply for one another. In the following days, the shift was noticeable yet subtle. The way John looked at Emily carried warmth and gratitude. The way Emily moved through the household reflected confidence and comfort in their growing bond. The children, too, seemed to sense the change, responding with quiet happiness to the newfound harmony between their mother figure and father. By admitting their feelings, John and Emily had crossed a threshold, from mere cohabitation and duty to the beginnings of true partnership. Built on respect, shared trials, and emerging love, this confession marked a turning point in their journey. Love was no longer a distant possibility. It was a tangible, growing force, intricately connected to the family, the ranch, and the life they were forging together. It was an acknowledgement that despite past hardships, both grief and youth, there was space for joy, affection, and connection, and that the family they were building could thrive on the foundation of their mutual care. Just as Emily and John began to feel the quiet satisfaction of harmony, the outside world intruded, threatening the fragile balance they had worked so hard to establish. Life on the ranch was never entirely predictable, but this time, the challenges came in multiple forms: financial strain, town gossip, and unexpected scrutiny from relatives. The combination of these pressures tested not only Emily's resilience, but also the strength of the bonds she had begun to form with John and the children. It became clear that the peace they had built was delicate and could only be maintained through careful navigation and unwavering support for one another. The first challenge emerged as a financial concern. The ranch had weathered the recent storm, but minor damages and losses had added unexpected expenses. John, ever practical, began to worry about whether the ranch could continue to thrive without additional labor or outside assistance. Emily, though young, quickly recognized the urgency of the situation. Drawing on her growing knowledge of the ranch and her innate problem-solving skills, she offered practical solutions, adjusting household budgets, finding ways to conserve supplies, and assisting with the daily operations to reduce costs. Her suggestions were met with initial skepticism from John, who was accustomed to managing everything himself. Yet, as he observed her determination and competence, he began to rely on her judgment, acknowledging that her involvement was not only helpful, but essential to the ranch's survival. Simultaneously, whispers from town created another layer of tension. Rumors about Emily's youth and inexperience, and her position in the household, circulated among neighbors and acquaintances. Some questioned whether she could fulfill her role as a mother figure to the children. Others speculated about her intentions toward John. These murmurs, though indirect, weighed heavily on Emily, who had already faced doubts from the children and herself. Rather than succumbing to discouragement, she confronted the gossip with quiet dignity, focusing instead on her responsibilities and the trust she had begun to cultivate with the family. Her resilience in the face of judgment earned John's respect and reinforced the children's growing admiration for her. Even within the family, challenges arose. A distant relative, once supportive of John's late wife, questioned Emily's suitability as a stepmother, implying that she could never live up to the memory of the mother they had lost. The children, particularly William, were sensitive to these opinions, and the comments threatened to disrupt the progress Emily had made in building trust with them. She faced a delicate balance, defending herself without alienating the children, asserting her role without appearing domineering. Through patience, empathy, and consistent demonstration of her care and commitment, Emily navigated these interactions with grace, gradually easing the fears and skepticism of the family and reinforcing her position as a dependable and loving presence in their lives. Amid these external pressures, Emily and John found themselves working closer together than ever. Planning the daily operations, responding to emergencies, and negotiating disputes required constant communication, cooperation, and mutual trust. Each challenge that arose became an opportunity for them to demonstrate not only their competence, but also the depth of their commitment to one another. The shared responsibility of protecting the ranch and family solidified their partnership, reinforcing the bond of love and respect that had begun to bloom in the aftermath of previous trials. By the end of this period of challenges, the family emerged stronger, more united, and more confident in their collective abilities. Emily's intelligence, courage, and dedication were no longer in question. She had proven herself capable of meeting the practical, emotional, and social demands of the household. John's admiration and affection deepened, while the children embraced her not only as a stepmother figure, but as an essential anchor in their lives. What had begun as a fragile, tentative bond had matured into a partnership resilient enough to withstand the pressures of the world beyond the ranch. In facing these trials together, the family learned a crucial lesson. True strength lies not only in individual ability, but in the capacity to support, trust, and rely on one another. Emily had become more than a helper or a wife. She had become a vital part of the family's foundation, shaping the path toward a life defined by love, trust, and resilience. After months of adjustment, struggle, and gradual bonding, the household had begun to transform into something more than a mere collection of individuals sharing a space. Emily's perseverance, patience, and unwavering commitment had begun to bear fruit. The children, once cautious, wary, and resistant, were now gradually opening their hearts to her presence. The shift, subtle at first, had become tangible. William's sharp, skeptical eyes softened when she offered guidance. Clara's tentative curiosity blossomed into trust and affection, and Ben's joyful, unreserved laughter now often included her as a central part of his world. These changes reflected not only Emily's efforts, but also the children's recognition that she was someone who truly cared for them, someone they could rely upon without fear of judgment or disappointment. John, who had long been reserved and cautious with his feelings, now found himself fully appreciating the woman Emily had become. No longer merely a young, inexperienced bride, she was a capable partner whose courage, intelligence, and empathy had repeatedly proven invaluable. Her presence was no longer a source of uncertainty. It had become an anchor in the family's life. He admired her not only for her practical abilities, but for the emotional strength she displayed, her capacity to love, nurture, and guide, even in the face of hardship. Slowly, he allowed himself to express affection openly, revealing warmth and tenderness that the children, too, began to sense and respond to. Emily's acceptance within the family was mirrored by her growing sense of belonging. The girl who had arrived, timid and unsure, was now a confident central figure in the household. She had learned the rhythm of the ranch, earned the respect of the children, and earned John's trust. More importantly, she had discovered the profound satisfaction that came from creating a home, a place of safety, love, and connection for a family that had once seemed fractured and distant. Her role had evolved beyond that of caretaker or wife. She had become a true partner, someone whose presence was integral to the family's cohesion and happiness. The children's acceptance played a pivotal role in this transformation. They began seeking Emily's advice, sharing their thoughts openly, and even initiating moments of play and laughter with her. William, who had been the most protective of his late mother's memory, started to regard Emily as a guide and confidant. Clara, sensitive and cautious, now turned to Emily for comfort and reassurance. Even Ben, whose trust had been the first to open, demonstrated a natural affection, seeking her companionship freely and joyfully. The progression of these bonds was gradual, marked by small gestures, quiet conversations, and moments of shared triumphs over daily challenges. Within this environment of growing trust and mutual respect, Emily and John's relationship deepened. Love, which had begun as cautious admiration and quiet acknowledgement, now became visible in shared glances, gentle touches, and moments of understanding that required no words. They had weathered crises together, supported one another through external pressures, and nurtured the children collectively. Their partnership was no longer theoretical or tentative. It was lived, tangible, and enduring. By this stage, the family had achieved a sense of harmony that was both earned and deeply satisfying. Emily's journey from a timid, inexperienced bride to a beloved wife and mother figure was complete, in the sense that she had fully integrated into the household and into the hearts of those around her. Love had become the binding force that connected them all. Emily's affection for the children's trust in her, and John's growing devotion. Together, they formed a resilient, unified family, capable of facing the challenges of ranch life and the uncertainties of the future. Ultimately, this stage of acceptance and love was not merely about affection. It was about mutual recognition of each other's worth, the acknowledgement of individual strengths, and the creation of a home built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Emily's presence had transformed the family, and in turn, the family had transformed her, offering a sense of purpose, belonging, and fulfillment that she had never known before. The journey that began with uncertainty and fear had now blossomed into a life defined by connection, partnership, and enduring love. By the time the seasons had cycled once more, the ranch had fully transformed, not only in appearance but in the rhythm of life it sustained. Emily, once a timid, uncertain 18-year-old, had grown into a confident, resilient, and beloved figure. The transformation was neither instantaneous nor easy. It had been the product of months of perseverance, patience, and unwavering care. The family, once fractured by grief and uncertainty, now stood as a unified, loving unit, bound together by shared struggles, triumphs, and the gentle but powerful force of love. Emily's integration into the family was complete. The children, William, Clara, and Ben, had come to see her not only as a caretaker, but as an indispensable presence in their lives. William, who had initially been skeptical and protective of his mother's memory, now sought Emily's advice and guidance, appreciating her judgment and warmth. Clara, once cautious and hesitant, had developed trust and affection for Emily, confiding her worries and dreams without fear. Even Ben, the youngest, laughed and played freely, unreservedly expressing the joy and security he felt in Emily's company. Their acceptance was a testament to her patience and kindness, and it reflected the depth of her emotional intelligence and commitment to nurturing these bonds. John's feelings for Emily had also matured into a steadfast, enduring love. Their relationship, built on shared responsibility, mutual respect, and the experiences of overcoming challenges together, had grown stronger with each passing day. The trust he had placed in her during crises and daily routines now extended to matters of the heart. Emily was no longer simply a young bride learning the ways of ranch life. She was a partner in every sense, capable of making decisions, offering wisdom, and sharing both the burdens and joys of running the household and ranch. Their love was quiet yet profound, a partnership rooted in respect, affection, and mutual understanding rather than fleeting passion or impulsive attraction. The ranch itself reflected the harmony of the family. Crops flourished, livestock thrived, and the home felt warm and welcoming, alive with laughter, conversation, and the small but significant rituals that defined daily life. Emily's influence was evident not only in the smooth running of the household, but in the emotional atmosphere. The ranch had become a sanctuary, a place where challenges were met together and joys were shared freely. Her presence had filled the void left by loss and uncertainty, creating stability, love, and a sense of continuity for the children and for John alike. Beyond the practical and emotional, Emily had also discovered a profound sense of personal fulfillment. She had come to the ranch as a timid, obedient girl, uncertain of her place in the world. Now she was confident in her abilities, secure in her role within the family, and proud of the love she had nurtured. The journey had transformed her, revealing strengths, courage, and resilience she had never known she possessed. She had not only adapted to the life she had entered, but had actively shaped it, leaving a lasting mark on the family and the ranch. As the story reaches its conclusion, the family stands together, not merely surviving, but thriving. The children are happy, secure, and deeply connected to both Emily and John. John has found love and companionship once more, tempered by experience and strengthened by the trials they have faced together. Emily has found purpose, belonging, and a life richer than she could have imagined. The ranch, once a place of solitude and challenge, now symbolizes hope, unity, and the enduring power of family. This new beginning is both literal and metaphorical, a life shaped by patience, perseverance, and love, with Emily at its center, guiding, nurturing, and thriving alongside those she has come to cherish. It is a story of transformation, of a young woman, a widowed rancher, and 3 children, finding harmony, love, and belonging in the face of uncertainty and adversity. Together, they have built not just a home, but a future full of promise, laughter, and the enduring strength of family.